The day has done all it needs to do. Now only stillness remains. Let your thoughts loosen, like threads unraveling in the dark. What comes next is not to solve or to chase, just a quiet story drifting close. Perhaps it's a voice that remembers you, or a silence that has waited patiently. Let it meet you where you are, and let it lead you gently into rest. The wind carried a restless hum through the Wyoming plains, where dust and dreams settled in equal measure. Sagebrush trembled under a sky bruised with twilight, and the town of Red Hollow sat quiet, its wooden porches creaking with secrets. A single lantern flickered outside the saloon, casting shadows that danced like half-forgotten promises. This was a place where folks kept their heads down, where stories clung to the air like smoke, and where no one spoke of the old manor on the hill, not unless they had to. Elliot Kane rode into town on a Mare as weary as he was. His boots were scuffed, his hat tipped low, and his eyes held the kind of ache that came from chasing something he couldn't name. He'd been a drifter for years, moving from one nowhere to the next, carrying little but a leather journal and a heart that refused to settle. Red Hollow was meant to be a stopover, a place to rest before the next trail. But as he tied his horse to the post outside the general store, he felt it a prickle along his spine, like the air itself was watching. Inside, the store smelled of tobacco and dried apples. A gray-haired woman behind the counter, Mrs. Harrow, eyed him with a suspicion reserved for strangers. "You passing through?" she asked, her voice sharp as a paring knife. Elliot nodded, tipping his hat. "Just need supplies, ma'am. Heading west come morning." She hummed, unimpressed, and slid a sack of flour across the counter. "Mind the hill road if you're out after dark. Ain't safe." He raised a brow, catching the way her fingers tightened on the ledger. "Why's that?" Mrs. Harrow's eyes flicked to the window where the manor's silhouette loomed against the fading light. "Just ain't," she said, and turned away. Elliot paid and stepped outside, the sack slung over his shoulder. The town felt smaller now, the silence heavier. He glanced up at the manor, its windows dark, its iron gates rusted. Ivy choked the stone walls, and the place seemed to lean forward, like it was listening. He shook off the thought and headed to the saloon, hoping a drink might dull the unease curling in his chest. The saloon was half empty, its air thick with whiskey and murmured card games. Elliot took a seat at the bar, where a man with a drooping mustache poured him a shot. "New face," the barkeep said. "What's your story?" "No story," Elliot replied, tossing back the drink. "Just a man and a road." The barkeep chuckled. "Everyone's got a story in Red Hollow. Some just don't know it yet." A woman's laugh cut through the room, soft but startling. Elliot turned, and there she was sitting alone at a corner table, a lace veil draped over her face. Her dress was old-fashioned, deep burgundy, and her hands were gloved, folded neatly over a fan. She seemed out of place, like a painting come to life. He couldn't see her eyes, but he felt them, steady and unyielding, fixed on him. "Who's she?" Elliot asked, keeping his voice low. The barkeep's smile faded. "That's Miss Clara. Keeps to herself. Best you do the same." Elliot nodded, but his gaze lingered. There was something about her, something that tugged at him, like a half-remembered dream. She rose, her movements graceful, and glided toward the door. As she passed, the air grew colder, and a faint scent of lavender trailed behind her. She paused just for a moment and tilted her head toward him. Then she was gone, the door swinging shut with a soft creak. He finished his drink, the warmth doing little to chase the chill. Outside, the night had thickened, and the manor on the hill seemed closer somehow, its shadow stretching across the town. Elliot untied his horse and led her to the boarding house, where a room waited. But as he climbed the stairs, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd stepped into something bigger than himself, something that had been waiting, patient as a spider for a man like him to wander too close. In his room, he set his journal on the table and opened it to a blank page. He didn't write, though. Instead, he stared out the window, where the manor's outline cut against the stars. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, and the sound felt like a warning. Red Hollow wasn't just a town, he realized. It was a place that held on to things, people, stories, maybe even time itself. And whatever it held, it didn't let go easily. The boarding house smelled of old wood and lye soap, its walls thin enough to carry the snores from the next room. Elliot lay on a narrow cot, staring at the ceiling where shadows pooled like spilled ink. Sleep wouldn't come. His mind kept drifting to the woman in the saloon, Miss Clara, the barkeep had called her. That lace veil, the way it hid her face, felt like a riddle he wasn't meant to solve. Yet her presence lingered, sharp as the lavender scent that had brushed past him. He rose before dawn, the floorboards groaning under his boots. His journal lay open on the table, still blank. He tucked it into his coat and headed downstairs where the landlady, a wiry woman named Mrs. Tate, was stoking the fire. She glanced at him, her eyes narrowing. "Up early, Mr. Kane? Trouble sleeping?" "Just restless," he said, forcing a smile. "Thought I'd take a walk." She nodded, but her gaze flicked to the window, toward the hill. "Stay off the manor road. Ain't no good comes from it." Elliot tipped his hat and stepped into the gray morning. The town was still, the air crisp with the promise of frost. His boots crunched on the dirt path as he wandered past shuttered shops and sleeping horses. Without meaning to, he found himself at the edge of Red Hollow, where the road to the manor began. It was a winding path, overgrown with weeds, leading to the iron gates he'd seen from afar. He told himself he was just curious, that he'd turn back before long. But his feet kept moving. The manor loomed larger as he approached, its stone walls weathered but proud. The gates were ajar, creaking softly in the breeze. Beyond them, a courtyard stretched, choked with dead leaves and broken fountains. The air felt heavier here, like it carried the weight of years. Elliot's hand brushed the gate, and a shiver ran through him. Not fear, exactly, but something close. He stepped through. The manor's front door was carved with roses, their petals chipped and faded. He knocked, half expecting no answer, but the door swung inward with a low groan. Dust motes floated in the dim light, and the air smelled of mildew and something sweeter, like flowers left too long in a vase. "Hello?" he called, his voice echoing. No one answered. He stepped inside, his boots scuffing the cracked marble floor. The foyer was grand once, with a chandelier dangling like a skeleton above a curving staircase. Portraits lined the walls, their faces blurred by time. Though one caught his eye, a woman in a burgundy dress, her face hidden behind a lace veil. His breath caught. It was her, Miss Clara. A floorboard creaked behind him. He spun, hand on the knife at his belt, but no one was there. Just the wind, he told himself, though the air was still. He moved deeper into the house, drawn to a parlor where a piano sat, its keys yellowed like old teeth. A music box rested on a table, its lid open, silent. He reached for it, then froze. Footsteps, soft, deliberate, came from the hall. "Who's there?" he called, his voice sharper than he meant. The footsteps stopped. He waited, heart thudding, but the silence stretched on. He turned back to the music box, and that's when he saw it, a folded letter tucked beneath it, sealed with red wax. His fingers hesitated, then broke the seal. The paper was brittle, the ink faded but legible. "My heart waits where the roses fade. Find me, if you dare." No signature, just those words, looping and elegant. He folded the letter and slipped it into his journal, his pulse quickening. The manor felt alive now, its walls watching, its shadows shifting. He moved to the staircase, drawn upward by something he couldn't name. The steps groaned under his weight, leading to a hallway lined with doors. One stood ajar, a sliver of light spilling through. He pushed it open. The room was a bedroom, untouched by time. A four-poster bed stood against one wall, its canopy draped in lace. A vanity held a silver mirror, its surface clouded. And there, on a chair, was a lace veil, folded neatly, as if waiting. He reached for it, then stopped. The air grew cold, and that lavender scent returned, stronger now. He turned, half expecting to see her, but the room was empty. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the windows. Elliot backed away, the veil untouched. He didn't belong here, not yet. He retraced his steps, the manor's silence pressing against him. As he reached the front door, he glanced back at the portrait. The woman's veiled face seemed to tilt, just slightly, as if watching him go. Back in Red Hollow, the town was waking. Elliot kept the letter to himself, its words looping in his mind. He didn't know what he'd stumbled into, but he knew one thing. Miss Clara, or whatever she was, wasn't just a woman in a saloon. She was a story, and he was caught in it. The morning sun did little to warm Red Hollow, its light thin and brittle as it spilled across the dirt streets. Elliot sat on the boarding house porch, his journal open in his lap, the letter from the manor tucked between its pages. He hadn't slept much, the words "find me, if you dare" circling his thoughts, like vultures. He traced the letter's wax seal with his thumb, its red flecked with gold like a drop of blood catching light. The manor pulled at him, a quiet ache he couldn't shake. But he wasn't fool enough to go back, not yet. He headed to the saloon, hoping the hum of voices might drown out the questions piling up in his mind. The place was livelier now, with ranch hands and townsfolk nursing coffee and whiskey. The barkeep, still sporting that drooping mustache, nodded as Elliot slid onto a stool. "Back already?" he said, pouring a coffee without asking. "Town get under your skin?" Elliot shrugged, sipping the bitter brew. "Just passing time. Tell me about that manor up the hill." The room stilled, conversations faltering like a skipped heartbeat. The barkeep's hands paused on a glass. "Ain't much to tell," he said, his voice low. "Belonged to the Whitlock family long ago. They're gone now. Place is empty." "Empty?" Elliot raised a brow, thinking of the footsteps, the veil, the letter. "Didn't look that way yesterday." The barkeep's eyes narrowed. "You went up there?" Elliot nodded. keeping his tone easy. Curiosity got the better of me. A man at a nearby table, his face weathered as old leather, leaned forward. "You best leave that place alone, stranger. Ain't just empty, it's wrong." His voice carried a tremor, like he'd seen something he couldn't unsee. Elliot leaned back, his fingers tapping the counter. "Wrong how?" The man hesitated, then muttered, "Folks say it holds on to things. People, mostly. Whitlock's built it, but it outlived them." Clara Whitlock, she was the last. The name hit Elliot like a cold wind. Clara? The woman from last night? The barkeep and the old man exchanged a glance, heavy with unspoken words. "Miss Clara don't come around often," the barkeep said. "When she does, it's a sign. Trouble follows." Elliot's thoughts flicked to the veiled woman in the saloon, her laugh, the way she'd looked at him. He wanted to ask more, but the room had gone quiet again, eyes darting away. He finished his coffee and left, the weight of their warnings settling in his chest. Outside, the day felt sharper, the manor's shadow stretching long even in daylight. He wandered to the town's edge where a small church stood, its steeple leaning slightly. The door was open, and inside a preacher was sweeping the floor, his movements slow and deliberate. He looked up as Elliot entered, his eyes kind but tired. "Morning, son. You look like a man with questions." Elliot hesitated, then pulled the letter from his journal. "Found this up at the manor. You know anything about it?" The preacher took the letter, his fingers tracing the words. His face soft, like he was remembering something long buried. "This is Clara's hand," he said quietly. "She was special. Loved that house, even when it turned on her." "Turned on her?" Elliot pressed. The preacher handed the letter back. The Whitlocks were wealthy, proud. Built that manor to last forever. But Clara, she was different. Gentle, always writing poetry, leaving notes for folks to find. Sighed she wanted to be remembered. Then one day she was gone. No one knows how. Some say she never left that house. Elliot's throat tightened. "You think she's still there?" The preacher's gaze drifted to the window, toward the hill. "I think some souls don't know how to leave. You be careful, son. That place has a way of pulling you in." Elliot left the church, the letter burning a hole in his pocket. He didn't believe in ghosts, not really, but the manor felt alive in a way he couldn't explain. He spent the afternoon walking Red Hollow's streets, asking questions in careful tones. Most folks brushed him off, but a few shared scraps of stories. Clara Whitlock, the youngest of her family, loved and lost, her heart tied to the manor. Some said she'd been betrayed, others that she'd chosen to stay, bound by something stronger than life. By dusk, he was back at the boarding house, sitting on his cot, staring at the letter. The words felt personal now, like they were written for him. He opened his journal and finally wrote, "Red Hollow, Wyoming. Something's here. Not sure if it's a story or a trap. Clara Whitlock, who was she? And why do I feel like she's waiting?" As night fell, the town grew quiet, but Elliot's mind buzzed. He stepped onto the porch, the air cool and heavy. In the distance, the manor's windows glinted like eyes catching moonlight. He didn't plan to go back, not tonight, but he knew he would. Clara, or her shadow, had left him no choice. The night wrapped Red Hollow in a quiet so deep it felt like the town was holding its breath. Elliot stood on the boarding house porch, his coat pulled tight against the chill. The manor on the hill was a shadow against the stars, its silhouette tugging at him like a tide. He told himself he wouldn't go back, not so soon, but the letter in his journal, with its looping script and cryptic challenge, had other ideas. "Find me, if you dare." The words were a hook, and he was caught. He lit a lantern, its flame flickering as he stepped onto the dirt road. The town slept behind him, its windows dark, its secrets tucked away. The path to the manor was steeper than he remembered, the weeds snagging at his boots like fingers. The iron gates stood open, as if expecting him. He hesitated, the lantern casting jittery shadows across the courtyard. The air was thick with that same floral scent, lavender, faint but unmistakable. He stepped through the gates, the creak of iron loud in the silence. Inside the manor, the foyer was just as he'd left it, the chandelier swaying slightly, the portraits staring down. Clara's painting seemed sharper now, her veiled face almost luminous in the lantern's glow. Elliot's boots echoed as he moved past the parlor, the music box still silent on its table. He didn't linger there. Something pulled him upward toward the staircase, its steps groaning under his weight. The hallway above was a tunnel of shadows, the doors along it closed except for one, the bedroom he'd found before. He pushed the door open, the hinges sighing. The room was unchanged, the four-poster bed, the clouded mirror, the lace veil folded on the chair. But tonight, the air felt charged, like the moment before a storm. He set the lantern on the vanity, its light catching the veil's delicate threads. He reached for it, then stopped. A soft hum drifted through the room, a melody, faint and mournful, like a music box winding down. Elliot turned, his heart kicking hard. The sound came from the hall. He grabbed the lantern and followed it, the melody growing clearer with each step. It led him to another door, this one carved with vines, its handle cold as ice. He pushed it open and found a study, its walls lined with books, their spines cracked and faded. A desk sat in the center, cluttered with papers and an inkwell long dried. The hum stopped, leaving only the sound of his own breathing. On the desk lay a single sheet of paper, fresh as if written yesterday. The same elegant script greeted him. "You came back. Few do. The roses know my heart, seek them where the light falls soft." No signature, just like before. Elliot's fingers trembled as he folded the note and tucked it into his journal. The roses again. He remembered the carved door downstairs, its petals chipped but vivid. Was that what she meant? He searched the study, his lantern casting long shadows. Behind a bookshelf he found a small door, barely noticeable, its frame hidden in the paneling. It opened with a reluctant creak, revealing a narrow staircase spiraling down. The air grew colder as he descended, the scent of lavender stronger now, mixed with damp stone. The stairs ended in a garden room, its glass ceiling cracked, letting moonlight spill over rose bushes long gone wild. Their thorns glinted, their blooms faded, but clinging to life. In the center stood a stone bench, and on it, another letter. Elliot's pulse quickened as he picked it up. "Here I waited. Here I loved. Here I broke. Will you stay?" The words felt like a question meant only for him. He looked around, half expecting to see her Clara, the woman in the veil, but the garden was empty, its roses swaying in a breeze he couldn't feel. He sat on the bench, the lantern at his feet. The manor was telling him something, piece by piece, through these letters. Clara Whitlock wasn't just a name or a ghost story. She was a presence woven into the house like thread in a tapestry. He didn't know her story yet, but he felt its weight, love, loss, something unfinished. The roses, the veil, the notes, they were clues or maybe invitations. He left the garden room, the letters heavy in his pocket. As he climbed back to the main house, the manor seemed to hum again, softer now, like a lullaby. Outside, the night was still, the town below asleep. He didn't look back as he passed through the gates, but he felt the manor watching, patient and unyielding. Red Hollow was no longer just a stopover. It was a place that held him, just as it held Clara. The dawn broke over Red Hollow with a pale, hesitant light, as if the sun wasn't sure it wanted to rise. Elliot sat at the boarding house's kitchen table, his journal open, the 3 letters from the manor spread before him. Their words wove together, and his mind roses waiting, a heart broken. Clara Whitlock's story was unfolding, but it felt less like a puzzle and more like a call, soft but insistent. He traced the latest note's script. "Will you stay?" He hadn't answered, not out loud, but his presence in Red Hollow was answer enough. Mrs. Tate shuffled in, setting a plate of biscuits and bacon before him. "You look like you ain't slept in days," she said, her tone more curious than kind. "That hill got you tangled, don't it?" Elliot met her gaze steady. "You know something about the manor, don't you?" She wiped her hands on her apron, her eyes flicking to the window. "Everyone knows something. Don't mean it's worth saying. You keep poking at that place, you'll find more than you want." He leaned forward. "Clara Whitlock, what happened to her?" Mrs. Tate's mouth tightened. She was young, pretty, full of dreams. Loved a man she shouldn't have. That's all I'll say. "Leave it be, Mr. Kane." She turned away, but her words lingered. Loved a man she shouldn't have. Elliot tucked the letters into his journal and headed out, the town stirring around him. The saloon was quiet this early, but he found the old man from before Jed. He'd learned sitting outside the general store, whittling a piece of wood. Jed's eyes lit up when Elliot approached. "Still chasing ghosts, boy?" Jed asked, his knife pausing. "Chasing answers," Elliot said, sitting beside him. "Tell me about Clara's man." Jed's hand stilled, the wood dropping to his lap. "You don't quit, do you?" "All right, but don't say I didn't warn you." His name was Samuel Cade. Drifter, like you. Charmed his way into Red Hollow about 30 years back. Clara fell hard too hard. Her family didn't approve. Whitlocks were high folk. Cade was nothing but trouble. Elliot's chest tightened. What happened? Yet's voice dropped. They'd planned to run off together. Clara left notes everywhere, full of poetry, saying she'd meet him where the roses grew. But Cade, he never showed. Left her waiting. After that, she wasn't the same. Shut herself in that manor, stopped coming to town. Then one day she was gone. No body, no trace. Just gone. Elliot thought of the garden room, the stone bench, the letter's words. Here I broke. You think Cade betrayed her? Jed shrugged. Some say he took her money and ran. Others say he loved her but got scared off by her kin. Either way, she paid the price. He picked up his wood, his knife moving again. That manor's her cage, boy. Don't let it be yours. Elliot thanked him and wandered toward the church, his thoughts heavy. The preacher was there, polishing pews, his face calm but wary when he saw Elliot. "You're still here," he said, setting down his rag. "Thought you'd be gone by now." "Clara's story's got a hold on me," Elliot admitted. "Heard about Samuel Cade? You know anything?" The preacher sighed, sitting on a pew. "Samuel was a fool. Loved Clara, I believe that much. But he was weak. Her father, old man Whitlock, made sure he knew his place. Threatened him, maybe worse. Samuel left town the night they were meant to run away. Clara never forgave him or herself." Elliot pulled out the latest letter, showing it to the preacher. "Found this in the manor. She's leaving these for me." "Why?" The preacher read it, his brow furrowing. "Clara always wanted to be seen, truly seen. Maybe she sees something in you, a drifter like Samuel. Maybe she's asking you to finish what he couldn't." "Finish what?" Elliot asked, frustration creeping in. The preacher's eyes were sad. "Her story. Her heart's still waiting, son. But be careful. That manor don't just give answers, it takes something back." Elliot left the church, the day slipping toward dusk. He didn't plan to return to the manor, but his feet led him there anyway, the path familiar now. The gates creaked as he passed, the courtyard silent under a fading sky. Inside, the manor was still, but the air felt expectant, like it knew he'd come. He went straight to the garden room, the roses glinting in the lantern's light. On the bench, another letter waited, sealed with red wax. He broke the seal, his hand steady despite the chill in his bones. "You know my pain now. Will you carry it? The roses hide my truth, dig where they bleed." The words felt heavier, more urgent. He looked at the rose bushes, their thorns sharp as secrets. Dig where they bleed. He didn't have a shovel, but the earth beneath one bush looked loose, disturbed. He knelt, his fingers brushing cold soil, and began to dig. The garden room was a pocket of stillness, the moonlight filtering through the cracked glass ceiling, casting silver webs over the rose bushes. Elliot knelt in the dirt, his fingers sifting through cold soil where the roses grew thickest. The words of Clara's latest letter, "Dig where they bleed," echoed in his mind, sharp and insistent. His lantern flickered beside him, its flame dancing as if caught in a breath he couldn't feel. The scent of lavender hung heavy, mingling with the earth, pulling him deeper into the manor's spell. His hands worked slowly, the soil yielding beneath his touch. It was loose, as if someone or something had turned it before. He didn't know what he expected to find, but each scrape of dirt felt like peeling back a layer of Clara's story. The rose's thorns snagged at his sleeves, their petals pale and brittle, like memories left too long in the dark. He dug deeper, the earth cool against his skin, until his fingers brushed something hard, a wooden box, small and worn, its edges soft. Elliot pulled it free, brushing dirt from its surface. It was no bigger than a book, its lid carved with a single rose, the same design as the manor's front door. His pulse quickened as he lifted the lid, the hinges creaking softly. Inside lay a locket, silver and tarnished, nestled on a bed of faded velvet. He held it to the lantern's light, its chain glinting faintly. The locket was heart-shaped, with initials etched on its back, C.W. and S.C., Clara Whitlock and Samuel Cade. He opened it, careful not to force the rusted clasp. Inside were two portraits, small and delicate. One showed a young woman with soft eyes and a wistful smile, Clara, unveiled, her face alive with hope. The other was a man sharp-featured, his gaze intense but uncertain. Samuel, Elliot guessed. The locket felt warm in his hand, heavier than it should have, as if it carried more than metal and glass. Beneath the locket was another note, folded tightly. Elliot unfolded it, his breath catching at the familiar script. "You found my heart." He promised to keep it safe, but promises break. "Will yours?" The words stung, not just for their sadness, but for the way they seemed to reach for him, asking something he wasn't sure he could give. He tucked the note and locket into his journal, his mind racing. Clara's story was no longer just a tale, it was a weight settling into his bones. The garden room grew colder, the air thick with that lavender scent. A soft rustle came from the roses, like fabric brushing against thorns. Elliot stood, lantern in hand, and scanned the shadows. Nothing moved, but the silence felt alive, watching. He wanted to call out, to ask Clara what she needed, but his voice stayed trapped in his throat. The manor wasn't just a house, it was her, or a piece of her, holding tight to what she'd lost. He climbed the narrow staircase back to the study, the locket heavy in his pocket. The manor's halls were quieter now, the hum of the music box gone. He paused at the desk where Clara's earlier note still lay, "The roses hide my truth." He was starting to understand. The roses, the locket, the letters, they were fragments of her, scattered like breadcrumbs. But to what end? Did she want him to find her, or to free her? Outside, the night was deep, the stars sharp above Red Hollow. Elliot didn't return to the boarding house. Instead, he sat on a bench in the courtyard, the locket in his hand. He thought of Yet's story, Samuel's betrayal, Clara's heartbreak. He thought of the preacher's warning that the manor took as much as it gave. And he thought of Clara's face in the locket, her smile so alive it hurt to see. He opened his journal and wrote, "Found a locket tonight. Clara and Samuel. She loved him and he left her. The manor's holding her story, but it's holding me too. What does she want? Redemption? Release? I don't know, but I can't walk away." The words felt like a confession, binding him to Red Hollow, to Clara. As he closed the journal, a breeze stirred, carrying that lavender scent again. He looked up at the manor's windows, dark but glinting, like eyes that never closed. Somewhere inside, Clara was waiting not just for him, but for something to shift, something to finish. He stood, the locket clutched tight, and made his way back to town. The manor let him go, but he knew it wasn't done with him. Not yet. The morning light in Red Hollow was soft, like a veil drawn over the town's sharp edges. Elliot sat on the boarding house steps, the locket heavy in his pocket, its silver warmed by his touch. He hadn't slept, not really. Clara's face from the locket kept him awake, her smile both a promise and a wound. The letters, tucked in his journal, whispered their questions. Will you stay? Will yours break? He didn't know what she was asking, but he felt the pull, stronger now, like a thread tied to his ribs. He headed to the saloon, needing noise to quiet his thoughts. The place was sparse, just a few early drinkers and the barkeep wiping down the counter. Elliot slid onto a stool, the locket a secret he wasn't ready to share. Coffee, he said, his voice rough from the sleepless night. The barkeep poured it, eyeing him. You look like you've seen something you can't unsee. Elliot shrugged, sipping the bitter brew. Just thinking. You ever hear of a locket tied to Clara Whitlock? The barkeep's hands stilled, his rag pausing mid-swipe. "You've been up to that manor again, haven't you?" Elliot didn't answer, just held his gaze. The barkeep sighed, heard whispers. Clara wore a locket always, said it held her heart, whatever that meant. When she vanished, so did it. Folks thought Samuel took it when he ran. Elliot's fingers brushed the locket in his pocket. "And if it's still here?" The barkeep leaned closer, his voice low. "Then you're in deeper than you know. That manor don't let go of what's hers." Elliot left the saloon, the locket's weight a reminder of Clara's story. He wandered to the church, hoping the preacher might have more answers. The old man was outside, tending a small garden, his hands dusty from the earth. He looked up as Elliot approached, his eyes sharp despite his age. "You're still chasing her," he said, not a question. Elliot pulled out the locket, letting it catch the light. "Found this in the manor. Clara and Samuel." "What's it mean?" The preacher took it, his fingers gentle, like he was holding something sacred. "This was her treasure," he said softly. "She gave it to Samuel the night they were meant to leave. Said it was her promise to him. He was supposed to meet her in the garden under the roses. He never came." Elliot's throat tightened. "Why didn't he?" The preacher handed the locket back, his gaze distant. "Fear, maybe. Her father was a hard man, didn't take kindly to Samuel. Some say he paid him off, others say he threatened worse. Either way, Samuel left, and Clara, she broke. Stayed in that manor, writing her notes, waiting for a man who'd never return." Elliot thought of the garden room, the stone bench, the roses. "She's still waiting, isn't she?" The preacher's eyes softened. "Some hearts don't know how to stop. That locket's her anchor, boy. Be careful what you do with it." Elliot left, the locket burning in his pocket. He didn't go back to the manor, not yet. Instead, he walked to town, piecing together Clara's story from the fragments he'd gathered. She'd loved Samuel, a man beneath her station, and he'd promised to take her away. But promises were fragile, and hers had shattered under the roses. The manor held her pain, her hope, maybe even her soul. And now it held him, too. By dusk, he was drawn back to the hill. The manor stood silent, its windows dark but watchful. He didn't need the lantern tonight, the moonlight was enough, guiding him through the gates to the garden room. The roses seemed to lean toward him, their thorns glinting like secrets. He sat on the bench, the locket in his hand, and spoke into the quiet. "Clara, I don't know what you want, but I'm here." The air stirred, lavender brushing past him. A shadow moved at the edge of the garden, too quick to follow. Then, on the bench beside him, a new letter appeared, its wax seal fresh. He broke it open, his hand steady. "You hold my heart now. Will you keep it safe? The mirror knows my face look where the light falls." The words were softer, almost pleading, and they carried a weight he couldn't ignore. Elliot stood, the locket and letter in his pocket. The mirror she meant the one in the bedroom, clouded and waiting. He felt the manor's pulse now, slow and steady, urging him on. Clara wasn't just a story anymore. She was a voice, and she was calling him. The manor's shadow stretched long over Red Hollow as Elliot climbed the hill, the locket a steady weight in his pocket. The night was clear, the stars sharp above, but the air felt thick, like it carried the manor's secrets in every breath. Clara's latest letter, "The mirror knows my face look," where the light falls burned in his mind, its words both a guide and a plea. He didn't know what he'd find, but he knew the manor wasn't just a house anymore. It was a story alive and unfinished, and he was part of it. The iron gates creaked as he passed, the courtyard silent under his boots. Inside, the foyer greeted him with its familiar chill, the chandelier glinting faintly in the moonlight that slipped through cracked windows. Clara's portrait watched from the wall, her veiled face seeming to shift as he moved past. He climbed the staircase, each step groaning, leading him to the bedroom where the clouded mirror waited. The room was as he'd left it, the four-poster bed draped in lace, the veil folded on the chair, the vanity holding the silver mirror. He set his lantern on the floor, its light soft but unsteady, casting shadows that danced like memories. The mirror's surface was tarnished, its edges framed in ornate silver, but it held a strange clarity despite the clouding. He stepped closer, the locket in one hand, Clara's letter in the other. "Look where the light falls," he murmured, holding the lantern higher. The flame's glow caught the mirror, and for a moment, the surface seemed to ripple, like water disturbed by a stone. He leaned in, his breath fogging the glass. The reflection showed his own face tired, unshaven. But something else flickered at the edge, a shadow that wasn't his. He turned, heart thudding, but the room was empty. He faced the mirror again, this time holding the locket up, its silver catching the light. The mirror shimmered, and there she was, Clara, her face unveiled, just as in the locket's portrait. Her eyes were soft, sad, but alive with something like hope. Her lips moved, though no sound came, and the air grew cold, heavy with lavender. Elliot's hand tightened on the locket, his voice low. "What do you need, Clara?" The image wavered, her face fading, but the mirror didn't return to normal. Instead, it showed a scene, a garden at twilight, roses blooming under a soft sky. Clara stood there, younger, her dress burgundy, her hands clasped around the locket. A man approached Samuel, his face sharp and nervous. They spoke, their voices silent but their gestures urgent. Clara pressed the locket into his hands, her eyes pleading. Samuel hesitated, then nodded, tucking it into his coat. They embraced, brief but fierce, before he turned and walked away. The scene shifted, faster now, Clara in the garden, alone, waiting. Hours passed, the sky darkening, her face crumpling as realization set in. She sank to the stone bench, her hands covering her face, the roses around her seeming to wilt. The mirror went dark, leaving only Elliot's reflection, his breath uneven. He stepped back, the locket warm in his palm. The mirror had shown him Clara's truth, her love, her betrayal, her abandonment. But why him? Why now? He looked at the letter again, its words clear. "The mirror knows my face." She'd wanted him to see her, not just as a ghost, but as a woman who'd loved and lost. A soft creak came from the doorway. Elliot spun, the lantern's light swinging wild. A shadow moved, quick and silent, vanishing into the hall. He followed, his boots loud against the floorboards, the lavender scent trailing like a guide. The shadow led him to the study, where the desk sat cluttered with papers. On it, a new letter waited, its wax seal unbroken. He opened it, his hand steady despite the chill. "You saw my heart break. Will you mend it? The roses hold my last wish, return what was taken." The words felt final, like a door closing. Return what was taken. The locket, he realized, was more than a keepsake. It was Clara's promise, stolen by Samuel's betrayal. She wanted it back, or something more. Elliot sat at the desk, the locket in his hand. He opened his journal and wrote, "Saw Clara tonight in the mirror. Saw her with Samuel, saw her break. She's not just waiting, she's asking. The locket's hers, but it's not enough. What did Samuel take? Her trust? Her life? I need to know." He closed the journal, the Manor's silence pressing close. Outside, the night held its breath. Elliot left the study, the letter and locket safe in his pocket. The Manor let him go, but its pull was stronger now, a quiet demand. Clara's story wasn't just hers anymore, it was his too, and he couldn't walk away until it was done. The air in Red Hollow carried a restless edge, as if the town sensed the shift in Elliot's heart. He walked its streets at dawn, the locket a constant weight in his pocket. Clara's latest letter return, what was taken etched in his mind. The Manor had shown him her pain, her betrayal reflected in the mirror's fleeting vision. But the words felt like a plea, not just for the locket, but for something deeper, something Samuel had stolen when he left her waiting under the roses. Elliot's boots scuffed the dirt, his thoughts tangled. He was no hero, just a drifter, yet Clara's story had claimed him. He stopped by the general store, where Mrs. Harrell was sweeping the porch, her eyes narrowing as he approached. "You're still here," she said, her voice clipped. "Thought you'd be halfway to Montana by now." "Got unfinished business," Elliot said, leaning against the railing. "Clara Whitlock, what do you know about what happened to her?" Mrs. Harrow's broom paused, her knuckles whitening on the handle. "You're digging in places you shouldn't, Mr. Kane. Clara's gone. Let her rest." "She's not resting," he said, his voice low. "Found her locket, her letters. She's asking for something." Mrs. Harrow's gaze flicked to the hill, where the Manor loomed. "That house don't let go." Clara was sweet, too sweet for this world. Loved a man who didn't deserve her. When he left, it broke her. Folks say she locked herself in that manor, writing letters to no one. Then she was gone. Don't know if she died or just faded. Elliot touched the locket through his coat. "And Samuel? What became of him?" She shrugged, her eyes hard. "No one knows. Left town, never came back. Some say he took her money, others her heart. Either way, he's dust now, same as her." Elliot thanked her and headed to the saloon, hoping for more pieces of the puzzle. The barkeep was there, polishing glasses, his mustache drooping as he nodded. "You look like a man with ghosts on his tail," he said, pouring Elliot a coffee. "Close enough," Elliot replied. "Samuel Cade, anyone know where he went after he left Clara?" The barkeep's eyes darkened. "Old story. Samuel was a charmer, but spineless. Word is he planned to run off with Clara, take her to California. But her father got wind of it. Made sure Samuel knew he'd never be welcome in a Whitlock's world. Night they were supposed to meet, Samuel was seen riding out of town alone. Never heard from again." Elliot's fingers tightened around his cup. "Clara's letters, they're asking me to return something? I think it's more than the locket." The barkeep leaned closer. "Careful, stranger. That Manor's got a way of twisting what you think you know. Clara's not just a ghost, she's a longing. You give her what she wants, you might lose something of your own." Elliot left, the warning heavy in his chest. He didn't go to the Manor, not yet. Instead, he sat by the church, the locket in his hand, its initials C-cunching the light. He opened his journal and wrote, "Clara's waiting for what Samuel took. Not just the locket, her trust, her hope. But he's gone, and I'm here. What can I give a Stuart?" The words felt like a confession, raw and uncertain. By dusk, the pull of the manor was too strong. He climbed the hill, the locket and letters in his pocket, his lantern casting a soft glow. The garden room was his destination, the roses waiting like silent witnesses. He knelt by the bench, the earth still loose from his digging. The roses seemed to watch, their petals pale in the moonlight. He set the locket on the bench, its silver gleaming, and spoke softly, "I have it, Clara. What else do you need?" The air stirred, a soft breeze, heavy with lavender. A new letter appeared beside the locket, its wax seal fresh. His hand shook as he opened it. "You carry my heart. Return it to me, and I am free." The roses marked the place. The words were a whisper, a final plea. Elliot stared at the locket, his heart pounding. Return it to her. The manor hummed, waiting. He didn't know how to free her, but he knew he had to try. The manor's garden room was a cradle of shadows, the roses catching moonlight like fragments of a broken dream. Elliot knelt by the stone bench, the locket glinting beside Clara's latest letter. "Return it to me, and I am free." The words carried a weight that pressed against his chest, a quiet urgency that made the air feel thinner. The lavender scent was stronger now, weaving through the roses, as if Clara herself lingered just out of sight. He held the locket, its silver warm from his touch, and felt the manor watching, waiting for him to act. He stood, the letter in one hand, the locket in the other. The roses marked the place she'd written, but he'd already dug here, found the box that held her heart. What more was there? He scanned the garden, its glass ceiling fractured, letting starlight spill over the tangled blooms. The earth beneath the largest rose bush looked disturbed again, as if the manor had shifted it in the night. He set the lantern down and knelt, his fingers sinking into the soil once more. The dirt was cold, softer than before, yielding to his touch. He dug carefully, the rose's thorns brushing his arms like a warning. Deeper now, his hands found something smooth, a cloth bundle tied with a faded ribbon. He pulled it free, brushing off the earth. The fabric was delicate, once white, now yellowed with age. Inside was a small journal, its leather cover cracked but intact. Clara's initials C.W. were embossed on the front, the same elegant script as her letters. Elliot opened it, his breath catching. The pages were filled with her handwriting, poems, and fragments of thoughts, each one a piece of her soul. One entry stood out, dated years ago. "Samuel promised me the stars, but he left me with thorns. I wait where the roses grow, where my heart still beats. If he returns, I'll forgive him. If he doesn't, I'll stay." The words blurred as he read, not from tears, but from the weight of her longing. He turned the pages, finding sketches of the garden, the bench, the locket. Another entry later. "Father says I'm a fool, but love is not a cage. I gave Samuel my heart, and he carries it still. If he betrays me, the roses will know." The final page was a single line. "My heart is here, under the roses. Let it be enough." Elliot closed the journal, his throat tight. The locket, the letters, now this, they were Clara's story, laid bare. She'd given Samuel everything, and he'd left her waiting. her heart buried in the garden. But Samuel was gone, and Elliot was here, holding what she'd lost. He placed the locket in the journal, tying the cloth bundle around it. "This is yours," he said softly, setting it on the bench. "I'm bringing it back." The air shifted, a soft hum rising from the roses, like a sigh held too long. The lantern flickered, casting shadows that seemed to sway. He felt her then, not a presence, but a feeling warm and heavy, like a hand brushing his shoulder. The roses trembled, their petals falling in a slow cascade, and for a moment the garden felt alive, not with sorrow, but with release. Elliot stood, the journal and locket left on the bench. He didn't know if this was what she meant by return, but it felt right, like giving back a piece of her that had been stolen. He stepped back, the lavender scent fading, the manor quieter now, as if it had exhaled. He left the garden room, the staircase creaking under his boots, and made his way to the foyer. Clara's portrait watched, her veiled face softer, less burdened. Outside, the night was still, Red Hollow sleeping below. Elliot paused in the courtyard, looking back at the manor. It didn't feel heavy anymore, not like before. He wrote in his journal, gave Clara her heart back tonight. The locket, her journal, her words. I hope it's enough. The manor's different, now lighter, maybe, but I'm not done. He closed the book, the stars bright above, and walked back to town. The manor let him go, its windows dark, but no longer watchful. Clara's story wasn't finished, not yet, but he'd given her something, maybe peace, maybe closure. He didn't know what came next, but he felt lighter too, as if the manor had let go of him, just a little. The dawn crept over Red Hollow, painting the town in hues of gold and gray, but the manor on the hill seemed to hold its own light, softer now, less shadowed. Elliot walked the streets, his journal heavy with Clara's story, the locket, the letters, the journal he'd left on the garden bench. Returning her heart had felt like a step toward something, but the manor's pull lingered, quieter, but still there, like a whisper he couldn't quite hear. He wasn't done, and neither was Clara. He stopped at the church where the preacher was mending a broken pew, his hands steady despite their age. The old man looked up, his eyes searching Elliot's face. "You've been to the manor again," he said, setting down his hammer. "You look different, lighter." Elliot pulled out his journal, though he didn't open it. Found Clara's journal last night. Her words, her heart. I left it with the locket, like she asked. Felt like she was there, letting go. The preacher nodded, his gaze drifting to the hill. "You gave her something back. That's more than most would do. But she's still bound to that place, isn't she?" Elliot's fingers tightened on the journal. "I think so. Her letters, they keep asking for something. I don't know if it's forgiveness or freedom or just to be seen." The preacher's voice softened. Clara was always searching for someone to truly see her. Not just her beauty, but her soul. Samuel failed her. Maybe you're here to do what he couldn't. Elliot left the church, the preacher's words heavy in his mind. He wandered to the saloon, where the barkeep was sweeping the floor, the morning quiet save for the clink of glasses. "You're still here," the barkeep said, not unkindly. "Thought you'd be gone after all that digging." Elliot leaned against the counter. Clara's journal found it under the roses. She wrote about Samuel, about waiting. I left it there with the locket. But it's not enough. The barkeep's mustache twitched. "You're trying to fix a broken heart, stranger. That's no small thing. Clara's been waiting a long time. Maybe she's waiting for you to say it's over. Elliot's thoughts turned to the manor, to the garden where he'd left Clara's heart. He didn't know how to end her story, but he knew he had to try. By dusk, he was climbing the hill again, the path familiar under his boots. The manor stood silent, its gates open, the courtyard bathed in twilight. Inside, the foyer was still, Clara's portrait softer now, her veiled face almost serene. He went straight to the garden room, the roses glowing faintly under the cracked glass ceiling. The bench was empty, no locket, no journal, as if the manor had claimed them. He sat, the air cool and tinged with lavender, and spoke into the quiet. Clara, I gave you back what I could. Your heart, your words. Tell me what's left. The roses stirred, their petals falling like soft rain. A warmth brushed his hand. Not a touch, but a feeling, gentle and sad. Then, on the bench, a final letter appeared, its wax seal gleaming. Elliot opened it, his heart steady but heavy. You returned my heart. Now give me yours. Speak my name where the roses bloom and let me rest. The words were a release, a last request. Elliot stood, the letter in his hand. He looked at the roses, their thorns soft by moonlight, and spoke softly. Clara Whitlock, I see you. Your love, your pain, your hope. You don't have to wait anymore. Be free. The air shimmered, the lavender scent rising like a sigh. The roses seemed to glow, their petals drifting upward, catching the light. A shadow moved at the garden's edge, a figure in burgundy, her veil lifted, her face clear for a moment. Clara smiled, not the wistful smile of the locket, but one of peace, her eyes bright with gratitude. Then she faded, the garden stilling, the manor exhaling. Elliot left the garden, the letter tucked into his journal. He wrote, spoke her name tonight, gave her my heart in a way. The manor's quiet now, like it's sleeping. I think she's free. He closed the book, the night calm around him, and walked back to Red Hollow. The manor didn't pull at him anymore. Clara's story was hers again, and he'd carried it as far as he could. The morning sun rose over Red Hollow, its light gentle, like a hand smoothing a wrinkled quilt. Elliot stood on the boarding house porch, his journal tucked under his arm, his mare saddled and waiting by the post. The town felt different now, quieter, not with the heavy silence of secrets, but with the calm of something settled. The manor on the hill stood bathed in gold, its windows no longer watchful, its shadow soft against the plains. Clara's story had ended last night, her name spoken under the roses, her smile a farewell that lingered in his heart. He walked to the saloon one last time, the familiar creak of its doors greeting him. The barkeep looked up, his mustache twitching with a half-smile. You're leaving, he said, pouring a coffee without asking. Ain't you? Elliot nodded, sliding onto a stool. Time to move on. Clara's at peace now. I think the manor is, too. The barkeep's eyes softened. You did something rare, stranger. Most folks run from that place. You stayed. What happened up there? Elliot sipped the coffee, its warmth grounding him. Gave her what she asked for. Her heart, her name. She let go, and so did I. The barkeep leaned on the counter, his voice low. Red Hollow won't forget you. Or her. Safe travels, Mr. Kane. Elliot tipped his hat and left the town waking around him. He stopped by the church, where the preacher was tending his garden, the earth rich under his hands. The old man stood as Elliot approached, his gaze warm but knowing. "You're different now," he said. "She changed you, didn't she?" Elliot touched his journal, where Clara's letters rested. "She showed me what it means to carry someone's story. I spoke her name last night, told her she was free. Felt like she heard me." The preacher's smile was faint but real. "You gave her rest, son. That's a gift. Where you headed now?" Elliot looked west, where the plains stretched endless. "Don't know yet. Wherever the road takes me." The preacher clasped his shoulder. "Carry her light with you, and don't look back." Elliot mounted his mare, the town falling behind as he rode toward the edge of Red Hollow. The manor loomed one last time, its roses visible even from the road, their petals catching the breeze. He paused, his hand brushing the journal in his saddlebag. He opened it and wrote, "Clara's free. The manor's quiet. I'm leaving Red Hollow, but I'm taking her with me. Not her ghost, but her hope. Maybe that's what she wanted all along." He closed the book, the words a quiet promise. The road stretched ahead, dust rising under his mare's hooves. The manor faded into the distance, its weight gone, its story complete. Elliot felt lighter, not just from leaving, but from carrying something new, a piece of Clara's heart, not bound, but shared. He didn't look back, but he smiled, the lavender scent faint in the air, like a memory bidding farewell. Red Hollow grew small behind him, its secrets safe, its ghosts at rest. The plains opened wide, the sky vast and unbroken. Elliot rode on, the road his only guide, Clara's story a soft echo in his soul. He was a drifter again, but not the same one who'd ridden into town. Some stories changed you, and hers had woven itself into his, gentle as a veil, strong as a rose. Not all spirits seek to frighten. Some just wish to be remembered. If their tale lingered with you, let it rest with your breath. Sleep well tonight. And if you hear a whisper in your dreams, maybe it's just the end of the story.